I was finally going to get to go to a real school. And I didn't know what cool was. I knew what I liked. I had these skirts that would put Laura Ingalls Wilder to shame. They were just replete with ripples. They just flowed all the way around, and if I sat down on the floor, I could spread them all around me in a perfect circle. Now my hair, I would gather my hair up to the very top of my head so that it was a fountain with springs just shooting off in every direction. You guys have seen Addison running around? Yeah. So I didn't know what cool was, and 6th grade happened. There wasn't a whole lot that was terribly memorable about 6th grade. But somewhere between 6th grade and 7th grade, something happened. Something changed. Now, in these old stories, there's always a beautiful maiden. Scylla was a beautiful maiden, and all of the men in the village wanted to be with her. But she didn't really care about men. She wasn't interested in any of that. She wanted to be a water nymph. So any chance she got, she would run down to the coast where all of her water nymph friends were, and they would play in the water, and they would splash, and the sunlight would glisten off the drops flying through the air. Scylla wanted to be a water nymph, and so every free moment she got, she was down there, and they would laugh, they would gossip about men they loved or men they spurned, but Scylla didn't really care about men. Well, one day she was down in the water, and all of her water nymph friends had swum off, but she was still there entertaining herself when Glaucus left. He saw her, and she was beautiful. He was smitten. And Scylla saw him, and his skin was green, his hair was wild, his eyes were wilder. He had a fish's tail where there was supposed to be legs. Love? She ran away, terrified, rejecting him completely. And in that moment, she had no idea just how much her life was about to change. Somewhere between 6th grade and 7th grade, something happened. Maybe it was hormones. I became a tomboy. John walked up to me. He had one of those little fans that you can get at Walgreens for like $1. They're battery operated, and normally the fan blades hang down at the side, but when you click them on, the top starts rotating and the fan blades pop up, and it's a great way to cool off in the middle of the summer. So he had one of these, and he walked up to me, and he shoved it in my face and he clicked it on. I wish these were knife blades. Clicked it off. But it would be a waste of water to wash your blood off. Glaucus went to Circe. Circe, who made potions. Circe, who had love and passion for men. She heard Glaucus's tale. Her heart went out to him. Forget Scylla. I understand you. I can give you the love and the passion that you long for. I know. But Glaucus only had eyes for Scylla. Circe burned at the rejection, so she made a potion. But not the love potion that Glaucus had asked for. She took that potion to Scylla's favorite coat. She poured the contents of it on the water. The next time Scylla went to bathe, she put her foot in. The water was cold when it was usually so warm, and as she stepped in, it burned and it stung her skin as the poison made its way into her blood. All of a sudden, the hounds were leaping up out of the water, snarling and gnashing their teeth. She screamed and tried to run away, but they were attached to her, coming from her own unexplored intimacies, these hounds, vicious and snarling. What could she do but stay hidden in
It can be hard for 3 women to make it on their own. Well, really more like 1 woman and her 2 daughters who were almost women. Helen and Marukla were sisters. And Helen knew that life was hard, but for her it wasn't quite so bad. Because she discovered early on that if she smiled in just the right way and said things or didn't say things in just the right ambiguous kind of way, that she could kind of get away with things or get certain things. And so for Helen, she knew life was hard, but it wasn't so bad. For Marukla, well, she knew that life could be worse, but sometimes that can either be a small consolation or just an empty nothing. And for their mom, well, she was tired. It was the middle of winter. The snow was knee-deep on the ground outside, and the wind was just barely whistling through the trees. Helen sat in front of the fire with a blanket pulled up over her lap. Marukla sat off on the side next to the drafty window, and she had 1 basket that was full of fibers for spinning, and she had another basket that she had already spun that she was knitting, and another basket of socks that needed fixing. And their mother was in the kitchen. Marukla, oh, this fire, it feels so nice. It is just warming my soul. It is so good to sit here. I needed this. I do so much for our family. I have garnered so much goodwill in town, and oh, this fire, it is relaxing me so much. I needed this. The winter is so long, and oh, I miss the violets, Marukla. Don't you miss the violets? Maybe you could find me some. Oh, that would make this moment perfect. And Marukla was working on her knitting, and she just looked at her sister. It's snowing, and it's the middle of winter. I don't think I can find violets. Well, it's just, it would be so nice, you know, because I've got this fire and it's making me feel better, and well, maybe Mother will have something to say about it. Mother, I've asked Marukla for just a simple favor, and she's just sitting there by the window, you know, with all this yarn. It's just a small thing. And a heavy sigh emanated from the kitchen. The mother walked out. She looked at Helen and she looked at Marukla. Marukla, why do you have to give your sister such a hard time? I mean, I don't know what she wants or why you're not helping, but we're a family. So without another word, their mother crossed the room to where Marukla was sitting, grabbed her by the arm, walked to the door. As she opened it, a gust of icy cold wind came rushing in, and Marukla went out. The door closed behind her with a solid lock. No. What? It's cold. And she couldn't even bring herself to try the doorknob. She just turned and started walking out into the night, into the darkness, where the snow was falling all around her. She couldn't see a thing, and it wasn't too long before she was lost. Every step was hard as she sunk through that knee-deep snow. And all she could feel was the ground beneath her feet, and that it was starting to get steeper and steeper and steeper, and she fell a number of times, but she could make out a light in the distance. So she kept her eyes on that light, and she climbed and she climbed and she climbed. When she finally got to the top, a whole clearing spread out in front of her, and that light had become a huge bonfire. Sitting around the bonfire were 12 men. The first 3 were old, older than time. And the next 3 were a little bit younger, and so on around the circle until, well, the last 3, they were quite handsome. Marukla stood just at the edges of the shadow. Her fingers had curled in from the cold, and she couldn't even feel the blood running down her knees from the number of times that she'd fallen on the ice in the snow. She waited only a moment, made her way forward. Please, it's so cold. The oldest man sat in a large throne with a beard that grew out of his face and hung down his belly. And so Marukla came to the fire, and slowly she could feel its heat, and her fingers started to uncurl. Her breathing became more regular. What brings you out in this snow, in this beautiful storm that I've created? Violets? I need some violets. This is my winter. There are no violets. Brother March, come, sit on the throne. And so Father December rose, and snowflakes fell off his shoulders. March came. As soon as he sat, the air was warm. The snow melted into that deep, dark, brown earth. And before you could blink an eye, it was covered in green. And before you could blink the other eye, flecks of purple were peeking out from the green. There are your violets. And so Marukla rushed forward. She used her skirt and filled it with these delicate, wilting flowers. And from there, she was able to make her way back home. I brought violets! And the door opened a crack. And the door opened further. And Helen scooped up all the violets. She offered some to her mother, who tried to smile but sighed. And the next day, Helen was sitting in her chair in front of the fire. Oh, Marukla, those violets, those were so great, but you know, in the dead of this winter, strawberries would just be so good. Strawberries? I don't think I can find strawberries. And a sigh emanated from the kitchen. And as Marukla could hear her mother's footsteps shuffling over, she was already on her feet and making her way to the door. And this time, June took the throne. And the air became as balmy and as warm as a midsummer's day. A midsummer's day in some place reasonable, like California. But we're in Arizona, so we'll say it was as warm as a midsummer's night. And the ground was covered in green, and kisses of red were just peeking out from underneath the leaves. As Marukla rushed forward, she could smell the sweetness of those strawberries, which she carried home. Helen was sitting in the fire, in front of the fire. Oh, what I wouldn't give for some apples. They're crunchy and sweet. And Marukla didn't even say a word. She just got up and walked to the door and let herself out. September sat on the throne. And the air didn't really warm up enough to melt the snow. It kept that crisp edge. The leaves on the trees were not vibrant and green, but brilliant oranges and deep reds that fluttered, hanging on with one last little grasp of life. And at the edge of the clearing was an apple tree. Apples mottled with red and golden yellows. Marukla walked up to the tree. With one shake, an apple fell with a soft plop. And with another shake, a second apple fell. Stop! 2 is all you get. And so Marukla took the 2 apples back home, and there was Helen sitting in front of the fire. There are your apples. Only 2? Where are the rest? There's more at the top of the Crystal Mountain. Well, why didn't you bring them back? You only brought 2 apples. Can't you do anything right? I do so much, and I just asked for this one thing. I will, fine, I will go. And so Helen got up and she left. She walked to the top of the Crystal Mountain. She saw the bonfire, the 12 men sitting around. Hi, I'm looking for apples, and I heard there were apples here. Maybe you can help me. I just want to take care of my family because I like to do that. And if I brought back some apples, oh, everyone would be so happy. December took one look at her and then turned back to the fire. The wind began to pick up. It started whistling, it started howling. Marukla and her mother were back at home. Time was ticking by. There was a sigh and a shuffle in the kitchen. I should get some apples. And the mother left. And the icicles were hanging from the trees like claws, but that wind was blowing harder and faster, and they were clinging together almost. And then the snow started to fall. It fell heavy and thick and fast. Marukla was home alone. The chair was empty. The wind was blowing so hard that the door was just rattling in its frame. So she got up and she walked over, and with a satisfying click, turned the key. And then she walked over to that chair by the fire. She pulled the blanket up over her lap. And that howling wind and the bitter cold outside was the perfect contrast to the comfort and the warmth that Marukla finally felt on the inside.